you so much for attending tonight's workshop. My name's Ben Sweeney, and I'm a Kittery resident who recently got involved with volunteer climate organizing and advocacy when myself and a handful of other motivated Kittery residents decided to form a new grassroots organization called Kittery Climate Action Now, also known as Kittery Can, to engage our community on the impacts of climate change and advocate for actions that make Kittery more resilient and sustainable. So Kittery Can hasn't even been around a full year yet, but we've already received tremendous support from other similar organizations like York Ready for 100 and Kennebunkport Climate Initiative, who we're really extremely grateful to have as co-hosts tonight. And that kind of regional collaboration is really what this event is all about. So we all have important roles to play in our communities, but we often can make even larger impacts if we work regionally with our neighbors who have the same vision that we do. And we're fortunate to live in a state that was willing to take an important step forward by developing the climate action plan. But now the real work begins to implement the plan. So today we're very excited to have several amazing speakers discuss the climate action plan with us and get us thinking about what we can do at the local and regional scale to ensure that this plan becomes a reality. So we have a packed agenda tonight, and I want to hand it off to our first speaker as quickly as possible. Before I do that, I just have a few housekeeping items to go over. So first, we ask that you please stay on mute during the presentation to avoid any background noise. I want to let you know that we will be recording the workshop. The only piece that we won't be recording are the breakout room sessions that I'll discuss a little bit more later. And then since we do have a large group, we're going to ask you to type any questions you have for our speakers into the chat box. So there we go. My slides weren't advancing. So I'm sure many of us are very familiar with Zoom at this stage of the pandemic, but to use the chat function, you can navigate to the icon at the bottom of your screen that says chat. And if you click on that window, or if you click on that, the chat window should appear and you should see a few messages that have already been posted. And you'll notice that Allie Samuel has graciously volunteered to be our technical support expert today. So please reach out to her if you have any technical difficulties. So on that note, I'm pleased to introduce Brian Ambrett, who is the Senior Climate Resilience Coordinator with the Maine Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future. Brian is going to kick off the workshop by providing a big picture overview of the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan. And again, if you do have any questions for Brian, please enter them in the chat. So thanks for joining us, Brian, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here with you, and good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's great to see such a huge turnout on an evening in February. I want to start off this evening with a big number statistic. Maine sends $4.5 billion each year out of state to import fossil fuel-based energy. So as we go through this evening's discussion, please keep that number in mind and consider that there might be other ways we can be investing that money to bring about a clean energy economy and resilient communities by keeping that money here in Maine. Next slide. I've been told that most of you have been following the council and have at least seen the parts of the climate action plan, which is good because I don't have time to cover it all in detail tonight and do it justice. So I'm going to quickly point out some major features of the plan and where you can access them if you haven't seen it yet, and then really focus our attention on a couple of key outcomes that the plan seeks and some ways that we're already moving towards implementation. So in 2019, Governor Mills and bipartisan legislation established the Maine Climate Council and two ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets. That is reducing the state's emissions 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% by 2050. And that legislation also included instructions to ensure that the state also builds resilience to the impacts of climate change for its people, industry, and communities. On December 1st, the Climate Council delivered that plan to the governor and the legislature. Next slide. The plan is significantly informed by a number of reports, 4 of which are shown here. The first is a absolute tour de force of the science of Maine and climate change impacts and what we can expect going into the future. The second is an economic and greenhouse gas modeling report or series of reports that takes a look at how those climate change impacts are impacting the economy and the people and the social and demographic characteristics of Maine. And then it really digs into some modeling and describes a pathway to hit our greenhouse gas reductions. There was an equity assessment on all of the proposed strategies that ensure that those strategies are addressing equity adequately. And then there's an accompanying document that really gets at how moving towards a clean energy economy is an opportunity to create jobs and new economic opportunity and growth here in the state. These are all available, as is the Climate Action Plan, at climatecouncil.maine.gov. Next slide, please. The plan itself has 4 goals, in no particular order really: to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to make Maine more resilient to the impacts of climate, to foster economic opportunity and prosperity, and to advance equity and through the climate response. And these are really felt throughout the whole planning document. Next slide. The plan itself lays out 8 broad strategy areas for addressing climate change. The first 3 really address the mitigation of greenhouse gases and reducing the state's carbon footprint and moving towards clean energy and energy efficiency in multiple sectors that you see there: transportation, our buildings, and our energy sector. Then the remaining 5 strategy areas really talk about how we adapt the state to the impacts of climate change that we're seeing and how we take advantage of this opportunity to grow not only clean energy jobs, but also the traditional heritage sectors in Maine that rely on healthy ecosystems, healthy lands, and healthy waters. And so there's much more detail behind these 8 icons here in the plan, and I'm going to actually invite you to take a look at those after the session tonight, because what I want to do in the next couple of slides is really dig into some of the targets that the plan lays out for some of these areas. So if you go to the next slide, Ben. On the greenhouse gas mitigation side, there are a number of targets, and I've highlighted just a couple of them here. There are more that you'll see in the plan. In transportation, there's a goal of really moving the state and the market for electric vehicles forward. And these targets would seem ambitious, certainly having 41,000 electric cars on the road in 2025 and 219,000 on the road by 2030 is a big goal. But that seems less big when we think about the context outside of Maine that's happening in. Norway, for example, sold 55% of its new car sales in 2020 were electric vehicles. Over half of the new cars sold in Norway last year were electric vehicles. General Motors just announced that its entire lineup of vehicles will be electric by the year 2035. So there's definitely evidence that the manufacturers and the markets are moving in this direction. And even just last week, the Biden administration announced that it was committed to making the federal fleet of cars 100% electric in the near future. So we think about this in the context of other rapid market shifts, it doesn't become quite so daunting. I bought my first cell phone in 2002, and I'm pretty sure that most of you on this call tonight probably had a cell phone by 2012, which would be 10 years later. Same thing when we think about the shift from horse-based transportation to cars over 100 years ago, 80% of that market shift happened in about 10 years. So there were early adopters that took it up in the preceding years, and there were some late adopters after that 10-year window, but 80% of that market shift happened in about 10 years. So this is possible, and it's certainly exciting to see the market moving in that direction already. The next 2 targets are really dealing with how our buildings perform for us and whether they're energy efficient and moving towards moving away from fossil-based fuels and towards electrification. So one target here is households with whole home heat pump heating and cooling systems. The target is for 35,000 of those by 2025 and 116,000 by 2030. We've already made really good progress on that. When Governor Mills came into office, she set a goal of having 100,000 heat pumps installed in Maine by 2025. And so you'll wonder why that number there for 2030 or 2025 is only 35,000. Well, there's another target in here for retrofit heat pumps, which accompany in-house legacy oil burner or natural gas systems. And so the remaining, what is that, 55,000 or so heat pumps would come from that other category. But we're moving towards that whole home target in 2050 of almost 500,000 heat pumps, replacing oil burners and other types of traditional legacy heating systems. We're currently installing about 15,000 heat pumps a year in Maine, with an additional number in the thousands or so through a low-income program through Efficiency Maine, Maine Housing, and the CAP agencies. And then there's a target there for weatherizing households. From 2010 to 2019, about 20,000 homes have been weatherized through Efficiency Maine programs and other Maine housing and community action programs. So we really are looking to double the pace of weatherization over the coming years. And that includes a target of over 1,000 low-income weatherizations per year. And to put that number in a bit of context for you as well, there are about 500,000 homes in Maine right now. And so when you add up these targets and the other targets that are listed in the plan for the climate mitigation, the greenhouse gas reduction targets, we see a pathway where we're reducing the state's greenhouse gas emissions based on a 1990 baseline by 32% by 2050, by 45% by 2030, and we're beating that 80% target by a little bit by 2050, the way that the models currently project it. So we certainly have some work to do to hit these numbers, but I think we've shown that we're making really good progress, and that progress, these numbers are feasible with some hard work. Next slide, please. On the resilience and adaptation and jobs side, a couple more selected outcomes here that we're targeting. Again, these are not all of them. Thinking about our food sector and our food systems, increasing the consumption of Maine harvested food to 20% by 2030 and 30% by 2050. We're roughly around 10% right now, so we've got some work to do there, but that will really cut down the greenhouse gas footprint of our food system here in Maine, and also provide healthier and fresher food to our folks here in Maine. As for land conservation, there's a goal here to increase the total acreage of conserved land statewide to 30%. We're currently sitting right around 20% or 4 million acres conserved. And this is actually in line with what the Biden administration just announced recently. We're ahead of the curve on this one. The Biden administration announced a national goal of 30% conserved lands as well. So Maine was leading on that one, and it's good to see national policy catching up. This is an important target because Maine's forests and durable forest products sequester an amount of carbon each year equal to about 60 to 75% of Maine's annual emissions. So our forests and our working lands are really doing some good work for us in sucking up some of that carbon, and it really puts Maine in a good place when we think about forest carbon programs that might be cropping up around the country. In terms of jobs, the goal is to double the number of clean economy jobs by 2030. And that would mean 30,000 clean energy jobs. We currently have about 9,000 jobs in energy efficiency jobs, and or somewhere around 15,000 or so total clean energy jobs at the present day. And just to give you an idea of where we are on fossil fuel related jobs statewide, we have a similar number, about 9,000 jobs statewide in the fossil fuel economy. New jobs in weatherization and installation projects for solar and offshore wind are a source of where these jobs can come from. And if we go to the next slide, there's some information here about where in the supply chain and where in the broad clean energy economy these jobs can come from, and where communities and communities will see benefits for public health, for workforce, for clean tech innovation, and for equity and a just transition. Next slide, please.
Okay, and Brian, just want to let you know that you have a couple minutes.
Great, wrapping up. So as far as implementing the plan, some items that are in process right now, again, focused around getting back to work and jobs. We are looking at a municipal infrastructure program that would really focus on bringing federal funds into the state for infrastructure projects so that we can rebuild our infrastructure, make it more resilient, and initiate new construction jobs in the state. We have an ambitious goal for weatherization. We'll certainly create lots of opportunities for jobs. That's a lot of work to weatherize Maine's homes. More infrastructure projects around replacing old and undersized culverts, multimodal transportation, wastewater and drinking water, broadband is a big one. And then our heritage industries, seafood, agriculture, timber, all of those are job opportunities, with lots of opportunities there for workforce training. And we're working closely in our office with the individual who is in charge of workforce development and bridging the communications, the messaging there between the clean energy economy and the opportunities for workforce development. Next slide. And so I'll let you just read through this as I close down here. I want to come back to that number, $4.5 billion, that we send out of state each year to import energy and fuels for our energy system as we have it. The transformative shift ahead of us is from spending money on extracting and importing fuels to an energy system in which the fuels from the sun and the wind are free, and our investments go towards improving system performance. And it's not just the energy system. It's not just improving the performance of the grid. It's improving the performance of our homes through weatherization and heat pumps, and improving the performance of our communities and our infrastructure when we need them most, which is during disasters. And with that, I'll look forward to hearing from Abby and Karina about their terrific work with Kittery and other towns in southern Maine. So thanks very much, Ben, and I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thanks, Brian. I know it can be, we gave you a difficult task of giving a overview of a really complex plan in a short amount of time, but I appreciate you giving us the highlights and kicking us off here. So unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, and we do have to move on. And we could have had an entire day discussing this plan further with Brian, but as he mentioned, if you haven't already read the plan, I would encourage you to go do that, and or at least read the sections that you're most interested in. So like I said, we have to move on. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I think regional collaboration and coordination on climate challenges will be really crucial to successfully addressing those challenges. So our next two speakers are doing some fantastic work in southern Maine and really leading efforts to tackle climate challenges in our region. So we're thrilled to have Abby Sherwin and Karina Grader from the Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. Abby is a senior planner and the Coastal Resilience Coordinator, and Karina is the Sustainability Coordinator. Abby and Karina, thanks for presenting to us this evening, and the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Ben. Can you hear me better? I adjusted my mic situation. Good, okay. Well, yeah, thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having us to speak at today's event. So we'll be talking today about the role regional planning organizations and regional efforts in general can play in advancing climate action, and specifically talking about the experiences that we've had here in southern Maine with SMPDC. So if you can advance it to the next slide. So SMPDC stands for Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. And some of you might not have heard of us, but we've been working in this region for quite a while. SMPDC was established in 1964. And what we are is a quasi-municipal nonprofit, and we work with 39 member municipalities extending from Kittery at the southern border and all the way up to Sweden near the White Mountain National Forest. And we're governed by an executive committee that's made up of municipal staff from all over this region. And our purpose is to help strengthen municipal government through regional action, to advocate on behalf of our member communities, to leverage resources to advance municipal work, and to identify, investigate, and address regional issues for our member towns. And we do this in a bunch of different regions or areas. We do it in the area of land use, economic development, transportation, and most recently, we started doing this work in the area of sustainability and resilience. Next slide. So SMPDC has always, had an interest in coastal issues, resilience issues through our land use planning and transportation work. And in the past few years, we started working with some municipalities on issues such as sea level rise and coastal hazards. But this work has been significantly expanded in the past few years, in part because of the establishment of the new Regional Sustainability and Resilience Program. So this program began when the coastal towns in York County approached SMPDC with the idea of starting a regional sustainability and resilience program that could help them work together to address climate change and other sustainability and resilience issues. So the towns that joined together were Kittery, York, Kennebunkport, Wells, Kennebunk, and Kennebunkport, and they all provided some funding to do a 2-year pilot program. And for that program, I was hired as the sustainability coordinator, and then the other folks leading the program is Abby Sherwin, who redirected some of her work to focus on coastal resilience through our program. So the mission of our Regional Sustainability and Resilience Program is to foster more sustainable and resilient communities in coastal York County by leveraging regional collaboration to enhance the effectiveness of local government sustainability and resilience action. And one of the primary focus areas for our municipalities and for our program is climate change and how we can work together as a region to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to climate impacts. Next slide. So our program is governed by 4 key goals that we established with the municipalities, and we strive to address these goals with the work we've undertaken in the past year since we got started last February. The first goal is collaboration. So to create a collaborative network to share knowledge and coordinate efforts in coastal York County. And we've worked towards this goal by having bi-monthly meetings with our member municipalities. We've developed a webinar series to share pertinent issues, and we have started holding forums of the different committee chairs of each town's sustainability and resilience focused committees. The second goal is assessment, so to assist with the evaluation of climate change and coastal issues. And to meet this goal, we've completed baseline sustainability and resilience assessments for each town to understand what actions they've taken in these areas in the past and where they want to move forward in the future. And from those individual assessments, we've created a regional assessment to direct the future regional action in the areas where regional work can be the strongest and best way forward. And we're also addressing key priority issues in more detail, such as sea level rise assessments and coastal hazard assessments for each town. Our third goal is integration, and we're working to support communities with incorporating sustainability and resilience into community operations, culture, planning, and decision making. And we're working towards this goal by assisting towns with incorporating these issues into their town planning efforts. For example, we recently assisted the town of Kennebunkport with setting climate change goals and priorities for the municipality. And we're also working collaboratively with the towns to make sure that any ongoing planning initiatives, such as comprehensive plan updates or ordinance reviews, are informed by sustainability, resilience, and climate change best practices. Our final goal is action. So to increase community resilience by coordinating climate change mitigation and adaptation planning and strategy implementation. And we're working towards this goal On one hand, by providing direct technical assistance to the individual communities on any energy-related projects or coastal adaptation projects they're working on, but we're also coordinating regional efforts to identify common climate adaptation strategies or energy-related strategies based on those assessments I mentioned before that could benefit from a regional approach. So next slide. After the establishment of our regional sustainability and resilience pilot program, Abby and I and the other colleagues at SMPDC began to look for ways to also incorporate climate action into our other regional efforts that are ongoing at Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission. And so one of those expanded efforts has been this Southern Maine Solar Collaborative. And what that is a group of 6 Maine municipalities that are working together to purchase solar energy through Maine's net energy billing program to reduce electricity emissions for their municipal operations. And collaborative procurement is something that SMPDC does in general with things like road salt and strip painting on roads, but it's also a great strategy for communities to participate in municipal solar because by working together, we can join together our resources to get a competitive bid process and get the pricing down for towns to participate in the net energy billing program. So to get them a bigger discount through the program. It also reduces the staff time and capacity needed in each town for them to participate in this process of finding a municipal solar provider. And it also empowers the communities to learn from one another and support each other as they learn more about the new and exciting renewable energy options that are always developing here in Maine. Next slide. And then another area where SMPDC has begun to incorporate climate change action into our ongoing regional work is through our transportation efforts. So SMPDC provides ongoing planning and technical assistance on transportation issues throughout the region. And we've begun to look at our ongoing efforts through the lens of climate action. So there are a number of projects that have resulted from this partnership. For example, we're working on a municipal EV readiness toolkit, which is a partnership with the regional planning organization in Portland as well. So extending our regional efforts beyond just ours and into others. But it will be an online resource for Maine municipal staff and committee members who are interested in exploring ways to support vehicle electrification in their municipality. So it will have guidance on things like EV infrastructure, EVs in municipal fleet, and how to plan for your community members and businesses to have more EVs on the road. So we hope to have this toolkit fully developed by early summer. So it's an ongoing project we just started. Another project we're working on is a model sustainable road design standards for municipalities to include in their subdivision or development ordinances. And so this is a way to assist municipalities across the region on incorporating sustainability and climate change considerations into their regulations. The standards will incorporate load impact design concepts and other sustainable road design and construction considerations. And it will encourage towns to build roadways that are climate resilient as well as pedestrian and bike friendly. And this guidance will hopefully be out sometime later this spring. So with that brief and fast overview, I will turn it over to Abby, who will take us through some of the ways we're addressing climate change through other regional efforts.
Thanks, Karina. Yeah, I'm going to highlight a few grant projects that SMPDC is working on right now with some of our coastal communities. First, we have a few projects addressing sea level rise in our program communities. So the first is called the Tides, Taxes, and New Tactics Project, and that's funded through the Maine Coastal Program Coastal Communities Grant Program. That involves the towns of Kennebunk, Wells, and York. And we are conducting a sea level rise vulnerability assessment for those towns. So we're combining municipal geospatial data with sea level rise data that has been developed by the State Geological Survey to provide these towns with a better understanding of potential impacts of sea level rise and coastal flooding within their towns. And it's really to provide baseline information about what potential impacts could be to transportation infrastructure, private and municipal property, property values, and also taking a look at social impacts and economic impacts to the communities as well. That project also involves some community engagement work with the overall goal of developing some very specific strategies that these towns can begin to implement to address their vulnerabilities and enhance their resilience to coastal flood hazards. And while that project only involves 3 of our towns, through the project, we are developing methodologies that can be applied by any coastal town for conducting similar assessments. We also have a grant project that's funded by the Economic Development Administration, or EDA, and that is expanding on that previous Tides, Taxes, and New Tactics project to apply the sea level rise vulnerability assessment methodology to the full 6-town group that's within our program, and also expanding the focus of the vulnerability assessment to include more of an emphasis on economic resilience. So really looking at the local economy and what the impacts could be of sea level rise and coastal flooding on our businesses, employment, and just economic activity in general. So those are 2 projects that are ongoing right now. Next slide, please. We also have a project that is kicking off this spring that is funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and that involves all of the coastal communities within our region. And we will be working with all 10 communities in addition to some partner organizations to develop a regional coastal resilience plan, which will be the first of its kind for Maine. So we'll be, again, building on our existing projects, assessing sea level rise vulnerability, and also assessing vulnerability associated with other coastal hazards to help the region develop a roadmap and a plan for beginning to address those vulnerabilities through very specific adaptation and mitigation options, with a focus on nature-based solutions. So solutions that mimic natural processes and take advantage of the benefits that nature provides for mitigating some of these hazards. Next slide, please. Karina and I have also been involved in the Climate Council process. I served on one of the working groups, the Community Resilience, Public Health and Emergency Management Working Group. So bringing our regional planning expertise to that process. We are also conducting outreach and education to our member municipalities about the Climate Council and the Climate Action Plan, so that we as a region can begin to move forward with climate action planning. And as part of that, we are in the process of putting together a training workshop, a web-based training workshop for our towns, which will be in March of this year, with the date yet to be determined. But we'll be discussing how municipalities can begin to act on the information that's in the Climate Action Plan, very similar to this event. So stay tuned for that. And we were also highlighted in the Climate Action Plan as a model for taking a regional approach to addressing these issues of sustainability, climate change, and community resilience, which is exciting. Next slide, please. And just a high-level overview about the different services that we provide to our member municipalities for beginning to address the impacts of climate change. We focus on land use, so working with our communities to identify ways that they could incorporate climate change considerations, sustainability, and resilience principles into land use regulations and zoning, things like that. We also work with our communities on comprehensive planning processes, working to help them develop sea level rise chapters and sustainability chapters through their comprehensive plans. We provide training. Karina highlighted a few of the training webinars that we've had in the past, so we continue to do that. We also provide direct technical assistance to our member municipalities on priorities related to climate change, sustainability, and community resilience. And lastly, we link our municipalities with experts and resources when we ourselves can't provide assistance. We link our communities with folks who can provide the needed information and resources. Next slide. And this is just the contact information for myself and Karina, and also our website, which is currently undergoing some revamping efforts, but all of our program documents and upcoming events are posted on our website. And we also have a bi-monthly newsletter that we release with updates about the program, resources, and funding opportunities. And you can sign up for that newsletter right on our website.
All right. Thank you so much, Abby and Karina, for the work that you've been doing in the region and for bringing additional resources to the communities in southern Maine, and just for reminding us of the importance of a regional approach to some of these challenges. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening and share your work with us. Karina, I saw you answering some questions in the chat, which is really appreciated because we unfortunately do have to move on again. And I apologize that there hasn't been much time to actually hear from the participants, but the next piece of this event will be, you will have the opportunity to kind of discuss and chat amongst each other a little bit more. So at this point in the workshop, we're going to split up into smaller breakout rooms to dive deeper into different strategies and actions related to 3 of the Maine Climate Council's focus areas. So those will be coastal and marine resources, transportation, and community resilience. We did our best to assign everyone to their first choice breakout room that you indicated when you registered. But unfortunately, we had to place some of you in your second choice breakout room, but you've all been assigned to your room already. So when we get into our breakout rooms, our wonderful speakers that you see on the slide will give a 10-minute presentation on their respective focus areas, and then we'll open it up to participants for 20 minutes of question and discussion. And our task for all of you is to come up with at least 3 big ideas or next steps related to the focus area that can be implemented in local communities or regionally in southern Maine. So after the breakout room session, we'll all come back together as we are now and have each group share the 3 big ideas or next steps that they came up with. So each breakout room will also have a facilitator from either Kittery Can, York Ready for 100, or the Kennebunkport Climate Initiative, who will moderate the session. You will also receive a 3-minute warning before the breakout room closes so you can wrap up your discussion and get ready to share your ideas and thoughts with the full group. So in a few seconds, you will receive a message inviting you to a breakout room. So to accept the invitation, just please click on the join breakout room, and then expect a brief delay before entering your room. And then we'll all see each other back here in a half an hour, so at 6:40. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and then I'll let Jamie go ahead and send us to our breakout rooms. So we'll see you all back in a half hour. All right, people are coming back. Jamie, can you hear me? I was having some bandwidth issues.
I can hear you, Ben.
Okay, great. I just figured I'd stop my video for now to preserve bandwidth. All right, so I think we have everybody back now. I hope you all had great conversations in your breakout rooms. I was in the community resilience breakout group, and we had a great discussion that we'll hear about in a little bit. But I figured for the report outs, we'll start first with the coastal and marine resources breakout group. So I'm eager to hear from all of you to what kind of big ideas you came up with. So Melissa, is that you?
Well, sure. I think our conversation, probably like other groups, got a little truncated because we were really just getting to formulating our big ideas. But I would say that that more support for land conservation was something that we discussed. All of the ways in which conserved lands provide a multitude of ecosystem services and community benefits. And clearly that is in line with the state climate action plan, as well as the 30 by 30 initiative nationwide. More support for land conservation. We were just getting into the idea of investigating more opportunities for aquaculture, for kelp or seaweed production. We have a tremendous, harbors here in South Coastal Maine. We have the Isles of Shoals. We have our Trape Academy here in Kittery that's on the waterfront. There feels like there's an awful lot of opportunity to enhance aquaculture and education and job training, kind of that beautiful nexus that would also be in line with the climate action plan. And then we were having some discussion about how to make sure that comprehensive plans actually do reflect the goals of the climate action plan. And I know Kennebunkport, Tom Morgan, who's a planner working with Kennebunkport, is raised some comments about that. So that feels like another area where we can all really look at our comprehensive plans and see if they really promote climate resilience. So I would say those are sort of three ideas that rose to the top.
Yeah, those are great. Thanks, Melissa. Does anyone else from your group want to chime in and add anything? Hearing no one. It's funny that land conservation also came up in the community resilience breakout group, and we might hear a little bit more about that in a moment. And I totally agree with the integrating climate into community plans and making sure that's kind of front and center and everything is viewed with that sort of climate lens. So I think that's a great big idea and a great kind of goal moving forward.
I just want to add that it has to happen because it's not in statute yet. So it really has to happen from ground up. It has to happen in towns. You have to demand it from your town.
Yeah, that's helpful context. Thank you. So some place that the community can really take the initiative and be the leader in addressing climate issues. Thanks, Lydia. So with that, we'll move on to our second breakout group, the transportation group. Mac, do you want to chime in? And it looks like you're on mute right now.
Yeah, we didn't really have a chance to pare this down to three ideas, but so I'll give you kind of a smorgasbord. We talked a fair amount about mass transit and the feasibility on the seacoast. There was some discussion about what has been done up in beach towns like Kennebunkport, some failed efforts, and certainly the realization that we need money available to put into mass transit. It's not going to be a self-sustaining thing. And just as a caveat, I know Maine spends a lot less on mass transit than others, than kind of the average across the country. So there was discussion with that, and that sort of segued into the Navy Yard and certainly the issues with all the traffic on the Navy Yard. Are there opportunities there to incentivize people to use less cars? We are fortunate to have the head of the Kittery Select Board who did throw a little cold water on that idea, because it seems like there have been a lot of efforts before between Kittery and the shipyard, and there are some federal laws that make some of these what seem great theoretically more difficult to get into action. So mass transit was certainly one big area. There was discussion about the need for more bike-friendly roads and more bike lanes, certainly. There was some discussion about EVs and just how we can incentivize people to be interested in EVs. It seems like here, people need to learn more about EVs. It seems like people are fairly ignorant about EVs, and boy, they're really quite remarkable in terms of cost savings over time. And so it's more opportunities to learn more about EVs, plus incentives for dealers to carry EVs. And this, again, may be an area where mutual cooperation between local towns would be worthwhile. Example, we had an EV fair, which was really well attended in the summer before last, and I could see that having great potential as an activity that was done between or among several communities. So that was another area. And there was some discussion about economies of scale, again, with purchases, again, with towns working together. We were discussing school buses, maybe not specifically in that arena of economy of scale, but that would be an area. I'd invite other members from transportation to speak up about what I missed.
Thanks, Mac. That was great. Does anyone else from the transportation group want to chime in? Or Joyce, do you want to provide any thoughts?
No, I think that's good. I think the only other thing we talked about was freight and just like box trucks and that kind of thing.
Okay, great. And I see that Polly mentioned in the chat that there's an EV hybrid event upcoming. Is that, Polly, do you have more information on that at this time? Or is that just a keep an eye out sort of thing?
We do have a date. I don't have it right on me, but I think it's in March. It's going to be at Trape Academy. And if people can bring their questions and see some vehicles and get questions answered at Adeltad.
Okay. Okay, great. So that's something that we can let folks know about through our Kittery Can kind of email list. So, so thanks, Polly. Sounds like there's certainly be more opportunities for similar education to happen between that. And I know that Abby and Karina mentioned that they'll be hosting a similar workshop to this one in the future. So it's great that there's a lot of excitement about the Maine Climate Action Plan. So with that, we'll move on to our third and final group, the Community Resilience Breakout Group. And I'll have Leah go ahead and give us an overview of what was discussed in that group.
It was very similar to some of the other groups. The biggest things that we came down to were creating partnerships and leveraging each other's assets and limiting liabilities. So creating stronger partnerships to be able to have larger impact. Regional efforts with shared goals was a big thing, and that kind of goes along in that same vein. And then the biggest piece too was communications between those networks, is like being able to figure out ways to communicate what's happening in all of the different regions and different organizations in order to better have shared goals. So there's not a real clear way to communicate what we're doing, as well as communicating to get together. Then there was a conversation about really being thoughtful and intentional about communicating about pay it now or pay it later, because that's a really powerful example that Cameron gave us in our session, that we can pay a very little bit now or we can pay a whole lot later. And we do tend to be very short-sighted as human beings, but trying to really communicate the long game and how that will ultimately save us money. And then we also had a conversation about engaging youth in all of these committees and giving them agency to be our future leaders. And I think we talked a lot about land conservation. I think I'm covering it, but please jump in if I didn't cover something.
Just one other piece was, it was also mentioned that we should engage our faith communities far more as well. There's no longer a tension there, I think, especially across much of New England, and several people who are attending tonight heard through their church groups, and so they haven't been natural allies in the past, but something that we should really think much more about reaching out to, especially sort of in that communication piece that Leah mentioned.
And I think leveraging those unusual partnerships, the partnerships that we don't necessarily think about off the top of our heads, I think is really important. So that was another piece that I'm remembering now. Thank you, Cam, because I did forget that.
And somebody had mentioned Efficiency Maine, because when you look at weatherization as a, looking for partner organizations, they're one that's out there, but local communities can have, groups that go out and help with repairs, fix a little plumbing so the water doesn't leak, whatever, those little jobs.
And I've mentioned, and Abby, maybe this is something you could help with, but having Efficiency Maine come down to Southern Maine and give perhaps an information session on the new incentives for EVs and weatherization, et cetera. I know we've done that with our sort of sustainability leaders, but having an event broadly might be really helpful to bring people up to speed, because things seem to be changing rapidly in terms of the resources they have.
I'll jump in just to offer a sort of a cross-cutting observation, and I think the impulse for Kittery Climate Action Now, and which is very much in line with York Ready for 100. I'd love Mac's comments maybe on this, but I think one of the greatest things we can do to really push things along in our communities is to pay attention and to speak out, because a lot of these decisions are being made by our decision makers, are well-intended, well-informed, but very busy, and select board members, town council members, and so on. And it's when people speak out and come out to a meeting and say, we care about these issues, that they become elevated. And they, and so, if no one's paying attention, it's kind of hard to get our decision makers to really focus on these when there's so many competing needs. So I think, yeah, something that just goes across all of these the three topic areas is for all of us to pay attention, read the paper, see what's coming up, before our decision makers, band together with, these networks that we're forming at events like this, and, be the squeaky wheel.
Oh, I would agree completely, Melissa. And, probably Judy could speak to this too. I don't know how it is in Kittery, but at York, when we were meeting, which seems like a century ago, but when we were meeting in person, if half a dozen people showed up that cared about a single topic, and 2 or 3 of them stood up at a community at the citizens comment section, boy, it seemed to make a huge impact on the select board. It really surprised me, being kind of new to this process.
Yes, I would agree. Please, we have a serious information gap in our society now. And back in the old days, even 5 or 6 years ago, people read the local papers, and we had a reporter who would put information about what was going on in Kittery in the local paper. Now, read the local paper, there's really nothing ever about Kittery, and people get their information from Facebook. I love Facebook for some things, but it's terrible for government public policy issues. So the town of Kittery has a great email listserv that has information about agendas of meetings. It has information about how you can join the Zoom meeting to make comment during public comment about these issues. Several of us on the council are strong advocates for climate responsibility, and we'd love to hear citizens support us.
And that's the same at every level of government. If you're there and you're the squeaky wheel, that's who they hear. You know, they have hearings at the state level. There's county commissioners meetings, there's our local meetings, and they're all doing stuff. They're all making decisions, whether we hear them or not.
And I'd just like to add, if I may, that the strategy H in the climate action plan is engage with Maine people and communities. And that has some suggestions in it. One of them is recognize climate leadership by Maine businesses and organizations. It's all about awareness, and it's about, they also suggest start the Maine Climate Corps for climate related workforce development. Raise awareness about climate change impacts and opportunities. I think that's something that we all can do in our own communities, as you are doing. So that whole strategy is something that I think you're doing very well, that you've begun to do very well.
Well,
just to build
what
on
Leah
that,
said kind of resonated with me about communication about environmental topics locally, and that it's we're in our silos, and we need to just make broader what we're doing, what's available, and I think that's a great thing about this Kittery Can organization, starting up, and also the Kennebunkport organization. That there's we're starting to get communities having groups that have mutual concerns or like concerns, and we just have to keep talking to each other, make our feelings known.
Hi, could I speak for a moment? My name's Jen Thayer. I work at Trape Academy. And I just wanted to, first I have a question. Will there be a recording of this meeting available for us?
Yes, the everything except the breakout rooms were recorded, so we can share those afterwards.
Fantastic. And I'd like to thank everybody. This is just wonderful. And I just wanted to put in my 2 cents here that I think reaching out to the students, I don't know what sort of funding or resources are available to our high school students, or even just, all of our students within our district or the districts across Southern Maine is available, but reaching out to our youth, I feel, is very important. And I would be interested in seeing if there is more support out there in the future to educate them, to bring some programs, some curriculum to them. I think it's really important to try to find ways to bring it into the actual curriculum for students and make it real for them and accessible, because they're so very busy, and after school programs can sometimes just get lost. If this were something that we could bring into the educational system, into our high schools, I think it would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Yeah, Jen, I just wanted to add, in our group, they talked about data collection and having citizen scientists. And I was thinking that would be really great to get the students involved in a project like that. So it's just something I wanted to add. This was on the marine, what was the title of the thing we did? Melissa?
Coastal and marine.
Coastal and marine.
Oh, that's promising. That's good to hear. We've had some extended learning opportunities through Susan Johnson, and we reach out to students, and we've had our small successes. That interestingly enough, in the breakout room that I was in, there was a presentation on green crabs. And that was one project that a student had worked on. And his idea was to capture the green crabs, take the meat, make them into pet food, and use the shells for compost. And it was a great program that she had going on that year. I think it was about 2 years ago. And our students have great ideas. And Melissa, as you had said, we have an amazing setting for that. And we've had teachers that have worked on, cultivating oysters and all these different things. But what I feel like we really need is a push and support and funding from the state or at a federal level. I'm not sure how it all works, but I think that if we could get this into the curriculum, our children are our future, as you know. So I think it would be really beneficial to take a look at that.
Yeah, I would second that. The whole idea of nature-based education, particularly in the lower grades, is just so important. We have a great example of an organization, White Pine, up in New York, that does that. And when kids enjoy nature, they are they live more sustainable lives, and they're just more aware of resources. So it's a great idea.
I absolutely agree. And yeah, I absolutely agree, Mac and Jen. I think we'll have to put a pin in that idea for now, since we are at 7 o'clock. So I do just want to wrap up by building on the theme of staying kind of engaged and connected. It shows, just by your participation today, which we really thank you for, it shows that you've all committed to staying aware and up to date on what our communities are doing and what the state's doing. But as a few folks have mentioned, we could always use more folks. We need more people to be engaged, and we need to be really inclusive about that engagement. So like folks had mentioned, reaching out to youth, giving them kind of leadership roles in this climate action space, and organizations of faith and other organizations that maybe in the past we haven't engaged as well as we should have. So I'll leave with that and just encourage you all to kind of stay engaged in this discussion. And I know from Kittery Can's perspective, we'll continue to work with our sister organizations in York and in Kennebunk, and hopefully there'll be more similar grassroots organizations kind of popping up. That'd be great to see. So thank you all again so much for joining us today, and an extra special thank you to our speakers and facilitators for making this event possible. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for everything.
All right, and with that,
Thanks, Ben.
hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.